Welcome to the final Balkans Debrief of 2025. I'm Ilva Tare, a resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Europe Center. Kosovo has ended a political deadlock. Albin Kurti's Vetëvendosje secured nearly 50% of the vote, an outcome many analysts did not expect after 9 months of institutional paralysis. Vetëvendosje is now the dominant force in Kosovo's politics, winning or leading every major national contest for the 4th time in a row. Now, the big questions begin. Can the government finally break the deadlock? Can a fragmented opposition rebuild? And what does this mean for Kosovo's relationship with Serbia, with the other neighbors in the region, and with its most important partners in Brussels and Washington, at a moment when normalization, sanctions, and strategic alignment are no longer abstract policy terms, but urgent realities? And with the 2026 presidential election on the horizon, President Vjosa Osmani has made it clear she wants a second term. Will this new balance of power secure it or fracture it? To discuss all this, my guest today is Yll Sadiku, Kosovar scholar at Harvard Law School. Yll, thank you for joining Balkans Debrief.
Thank you for having me here, Ilva.
What are your main takeaways from this election, both the results and what it signals about the political sentiment in Kosovo today?
So I think that we should begin by recognizing that the election process has once again proved that Kosovo is a mature and functioning democracy. There are no major incidents reported. The Central Election Commission has proved very efficient and trustworthy by all the parties. No one has contested the legitimacy of the process, and party leaders have congratulated the winner publicly. So I think that all this shows that Kosovo has proven that it has become a model that needs to be followed by other countries in the region when it comes to democratic processes. So as for the results, I think that the election result with Vetëvendosje as a leading party was expected. However, the magnitude of the victory was not. Most analysts predicted a Vetëvendosje win, but no one predicted them approaching 50%. So according to the preliminary results, without the diaspora votes, Vetëvendosje is projected to have around 56 seats, followed by the Democratic Party with 23 seats, and the Democratic League with 15 seats, and the Alliance for the Future of Kosovo with 6 seats. So I think this puts Vetëvendosje in a position where, with a few seats from the minorities, to form a government on its own.
That's my question, Yll. Why was the scale of this victory somehow underestimated by analysts and by many watchers of Kosovo?
Well, I think that it was a combination of many factors, which all combined played a significant role in these results. Yeah. So as to what led to such significant victory, I think that first was the institutional deadlock and the fear of another crisis. So the deadlock for almost a year has played a major role in the increase of votes for Vetëvendosje. So Kosovo's institutions, I believe, have paid a substantial price for this deadlock. And also the people began to experience something very tangible, something very concrete. So there was no functioning parliament. There was an arguably functioning government. All the reforms were being delayed. There was uncertainty regarding some international financial assistance. Recently, uncertainty about the budget. So I believe that the citizens were sort of like afraid of the consequences of another institutional crisis.
Another paralysis, yeah. But in your view, was this result primarily a vote of confidence in Kurti, a rejection of the opposition, or a reaction to the prolonged political paralysis, which you just said? But I want the answer for the other two options that I just gave you.
Yeah, I think it was a combination of all. It was also a vote of confidence in Kurti, because his campaign was that, at least what he portrayed to people, was that I got 42%, and that's not enough. I cannot find people to work with from the opposition party. So now I need even more, and I think that people, that's why a majority of people voted him. But also, on the other hand, I also believe that people perceived that there was sort of like an absence of a credible alternative. So the opposition parties focused their campaign on why the people should not vote Kurti and sort of like lack substantial programs on their governance, models.
Critics call Kurti's governance improvisational, yet supporters view him as a principled and uncorrupted politician. How do you explain this gap between perceived competence and perceived integrity?
Well, I think Vetëvendosje's governance model had emphasized its social focus. So the governance model touched upon the most vulnerable citizens, and then it touched upon some categories that the people had perceived as being ignored for years. And I believe that this sort of like is recognized by the people, and then also enabled Vetëvendosje to get support beyond its traditional base. There are many critics, and a lot of critics are in place and in order, but I think that ultimately a result that is around 50%, with the potential of being above 50% after the diaspora votes.
Indeed, yeah.
About what the people believe in Kurti's competence.
And despite economic strain, high living costs, and the EU freezes on funding, the opposition couldn't capitalize on all these problems. Why did those fail to translate into votes against Vetëvendosje, in your analysis, in your view?
Yeah. So I think a big part of that was that the people found economic indications to be quite mixed. So it is true that there have been struggles with the cost of living and the private sector growth and other economic domains. However, I think that the people found most of these problems as a continuance from previous years, and to some extent as a result of external factors that were beyond the government's reach, such as we have the pandemics, we have the conflicts, the effects of conflicts around the world. And so I think there was a lot of criticism, a lot of dissatisfaction on the economic situation, economic development of Kosovo. But I don't think it was at the level as to turn it into punishment for Vetëvendosje in elections.
Let me ask you a little bit about the opposition landscape. On the LDK, we had Lumnir Abdjiku that accepted responsibility, and now he's receiving calls to resign. Why couldn't the party of Ibrahim Rugova offer a credible alternative during the deadlock?
I think that the LDK being at 13%, it's a clear verdict. Let me rephrase this. So having only 13% in these elections, it's a clear verdict by the people that the LDK needs reforms. And these reforms should come internally. I believe one part of the reason why the LDK could not perform better was because there were also internal divisions, which now are being made public. And also sort of like we have seen in the LDK campaign to be quite detached from the political reality and detached from what people actually, LDK voters would actually want to see. So I think that some reforms within the LDK are necessary in order for it to sort of like aim for a better result.
And on the PDK, we saw Memli Krasniqi resigning after the local elections, and Bedri Hamza getting leadership of the party, but still the result didn't change for that party, while the KLA leaders are facing trial on Hague. Why couldn't they capitalize on votes?
I think that for the PDK for Bedri Hamza now running 2 times in a row, it's actually it being seen as a success because it sort of like maintained those kind of votes, and it sort of falls within the predictions that were made before the elections. So I think some kind of reforms are also needed in the PDK in PDK for them, in order for them to grow. However, I think that maintaining in this situation, now that we're seeing that Vetëvendosje approach 50%, I think that PDK maintaining the vote that they had, it's like around the vote that they had in February, it's actually a success for them.
Let me ask you about the government formation scenarios and the election of the president of Kosovo. With Vetëvendosje near 50%, but short of the 61 seats that are needed to form the government to have full control, what are the realistic scenarios there on the coalition?
I think so. With Vetëvendosje only needs a few votes for it to form the government, and I think that Vetëvendosje can easily find these votes within the minorities, and I believe that they will form the government and they will do it fast. However, this will not be the test whether the government is stable or not. The real test will be the election of the president. So for the election of the president, 2/3 of the parliament are needed for the first 2 rounds. And then if the first 2 rounds fail, then 2/3 are only needed to be present in the room. I think that that Vetëvendosje is in good position to push for candidates of its own because of the result from the Sunday's elections. Now, the opposition parties are not in a position where they can afford to go to another election, at least not in a very short period of time. So any potential election because of the failure to elect the president can, at least in my view, play only in favor of Vetëvendosje, just as it did the deadlock. So I think that the true test will be the election of the president. I know that President Osmani has publicly made it public that she is seeking a re-election, a second term. But regarding the coalitions, I think that there are many different scenarios, but I believe that the opposition parties are aware of potential effects of another institutional crisis, and they sort of like will be more willing to cooperate and to participate in this process, so, as well as Vetëvendosje.
Now, what does this victory of Vetëvendosje and Albin Kurti mean for the foreign policy and the relations with the neighbors in the region for Kosovo? As you may know, the US and the EU signaled frustration with Albin Kurti's approach on the north, the issue of the north, or on the normalization dialogue with Serbia. Washington has frozen the strategic partnership with Pristina, and now that we are in front of a renewed and strong mandate, does Kurti, you think, will change approach towards the international, or the internationals will change approach towards Kurti?
So I hope that the main takeaway for our international partners should be the predictability of a potentially stable government, which was a concern recently. Another expectations from the EU and the US is definitely going to be that they will expect a new government to be more pragmatic in their approach and in fulfilling the responsibilities that derive from international agreements, especially from the Brussels Agreement and its annex. But I also think that it's important for us to recognize that there have been recent developments on these fronts. So the EU has announced the lifting of sanctions, and the effect of these sanctions have been felt by all Kosovo citizens. And then on the other hand, Kosovo has done a great job in being fully aligned with the foreign and security policy of the EU. And this has shown Kosovo's unshakable determination to be part of this organization, and this has been part of all Kosovo leadership plans. Everyone has been very vocal in their belief that Kosovo's future is in the EU. Kosovo has also scored substantial improvement in the rule of law. So on this front, I believe that it is time for the EU to sort of like find a new approach toward Kosovo, but also with some adjustments from the Kosovo's government as well. I think the main challenge here will be to convince the EU that it is time to review Kosovo's application and its status to change gradually. With the EU facilitated dialogue, Kosovo has been part of the dialogue, and I believe that it should be part of the table at all times. One of the pressing issues here will be the implementation of the Brussels Agreement and its annex. And I think
and especially the ASM, because I didn't want to interrupt you. How will Kurti navigate the Western priority as the Association for Serb-Majority in the north is?
So yeah, it is true, especially Article 7 of the annex, which is the association. I think that's the most pressing issues, and that's what will be asked from Kosovo government. And I think one way to navigate it is to sort of like try and look at this agreement as a whole, because this agreement has a lot of responsibilities for both parties, and then both parties must implement it. And sort of like convincing the international community that this is the right approach, that all parties should implement their respective responsibilities, will be one of the challenges of the new government.
And what are the implications in regards to relations with Serbia, for instance?
Well, I believe that now, again, there are a lot of elements that need to be taken into account on this front. So with Serbia, I believe that Kosovo's conduct has not been anywhere close to provoking any kind of threat to peace and stability in the region. And I cannot say the same with Serbia, where Kosovo has experienced attacks in critical infrastructure and attacks on its territorial integrity recently. So I think that all Kosovo's conduct must be coordinated with our international allies, and sort of like to try and minimize the influence and intentions of Serbia to destabilize the region.
And how about the relations with other neighbors in the region, North Macedonia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and other neighbors, especially against the backdrop of the EU enlargement dynamics?
Well, I think that that Kurti government has sort of like been very cooperative when it comes to other to the relations with other countries in the region. The only concern has been, and it will be, the relation with Serbia. But I am confident that with the close coordination with our international allies, with the EU, with the US, which I know that Kosovo institutions try to do so, I think that the threat can be minimized.
Finally, Yll, if you were advising policymakers that are listening Balkans Debrief today, what should they do differently in engaging with Albin Kurti, third government, compared to the two previous ones?
Well, I think that now everyone should know that Kurti will be around for some time, and that Vetëvendosje is the main political force in Kosovo, and that also it does have the legitimacy of the people. Anything that would sort of like try to undermine this has only proven to have a contrary effect. So I think this should be taken into account. And then I also believe that Vetëvendosje as a political party, and now after they form the government, are actually the ones who have the ability to push forward the implementation of international agreements that Kosovo has already agreed to.
Thank you, Yll Sadiku, for your sharp insights, and thank you to our audience for joining me in this final Balkans Debrief of 2025. We will continue to follow Kosovo's political trajectory closely in the new year.
Thank you so much, Ilva.